Hello, everybody. This is Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government, and here to talk a little bit about something that we've discussed quite a bit over the last month, and that is the coming recession. And today, the Bureau of Economic Analysis out of the Department of Commerce confirmed what most people in America already knew, and that is that America is in recession. And we've now had 2 quarters in a row with a declining GDP. What that means, and just people throw around terms, but let me just make it clear what it means. GDP is gross domestic product. That is the total value of everything in all the economic activity in the U.S. economy, and so that's a no. It's calculated. It changes. They revise it as they get more information about what's happened. But bottom line is that's a fixed thing that we've been measuring over a long period of time. So it's a knowable amount, and it's comparable to previous quarters, previous years. And so what we have is the size of our economy as it relates to the inflation rate has become worth less than in quarter 2 than it was in quarter 1. And in quarter 1 of 2022, it was less than it was in quarter 3 or in quarter 4 of 2021. Gets a little confusing because you have with inflation, if an example, if you're spending 5% more on gasoline and you buy the same amount of gasoline as you did before, it shows what this shows is that you spend 5% more on gasoline, which is a growth in the economy. Okay, would mean that, oh, so the economy is growing, you're going to have more spending. So they then compare what the number is, what the actual number is, versus inflation, and they work it back. And so it's really when they talk about GDP contracting, the economy contracting, they're including in inflation as a determiner. And when the economy expands, it's expanding faster than inflation. And when it contracts, it doesn't expand as fast as inflation. So that's the way this is. So inflation is a determiner here. This is in real dollars, just like when you get paid. If you get paid, you get a 5% raise, but inflation's 10%. You didn't really get a raise. You lost. Your real wage went down by 5%. So it's similar to that in terms of how this is figured. So the economy over the last 2 quarters has gone down, has contracted, and so we are in what is that's the definition of a recession, is 2 quarters in a row of economic contraction. So what does this mean? What we're going to see now is we have Joe Biden has already tried to say we're not in a recession. He's tried to change the term of what the term recession means to say that it's dependent upon job losses for a recession to be considered a recession. And at some level, there's some level of accuracy to that, on the margins, in that if you don't have job losses, if a recession occurs and there's not job losses, do people really even know it's a recession? And that would be out of all the recessions, all the times when you've had 2 quarters in a row with the contraction, only in 1947 did you find there to be not job losses also going along with the recession. But what Joe isn't telling anybody, maybe he doesn't know, I don't know, but what he isn't telling people is that jobs and the employment is a lag indicator. It isn't a leading indicator of a recession. It's actually one of the last things you see in a recession. And the reason for that is, as an employer, the last thing I want to do is lay somebody off. You invest in people, you help them try to grow. You have a plan for how they're going to help build your company, help you build your association. So you sit there and you have a plan. You worked with them. You like them. You become kind of you're pulling the oar together in the same ship, trying to go the same direction. And so the last thing you want to do is lay people off. In fact, as an employer, first thing you do is you cut your own salary or take no money until you have to go. And then at some point you say, well, listen, this isn't sustainable, at which point you start laying people off. And so in small to mid-sized businesses where you have individual owners, single proprietorships, owning the layoffs are like the last thing that happens. And so you try to do everything you can to avoid them, because as a human being, you don't want to make it so somebody else ends up having hardship in their life if you can avoid it, particularly somebody who's doing good work for you who you like. Because trust me, when you lay somebody off, really hard to keep friends. So that's the reality of how human nature is. What's more, when you're sitting there in our current economy, we're in an interesting position because we have a drop in our labor force has not been advancing and increasing the way it normally has in the past. It's largely a part of it's the aging of the labor force. It's the baby boomers retiring. It's truthfully, it's a lack of birth rate. It's birth rate declining over the course of the last 30, 40 years. And so because of that, the labor force has not been growing and in the last couple of years, 3 years. But particularly since the recession, we have seen a drop in the number of people willing to be in the workforce. People aged 16 to 64, there's a higher percentage of people aged 16 to 64 in the workforce than there was prior to the COVID recession, the Chinese recession that was imposed on us. And that's great news. The bad news is that because we've got an aging population, there's a lot more people retired than have come in from 16 to 64, and hence you have a less of a workforce. What that means is for an economy to grow, each worker has to be more productive. And if you have a shrinking workforce, if you have a growing workforce for the economy to grow, each worker just has to maintain the same level of productivity. But if you have a shrinking labor force, then those workers have to have a higher productivity to create more goods and services for the same amount of money. And so productivity goes into this, becomes very important. I think there's some questions about productivity in the work from home economy. And it's that we're kind of morphing into a little bit. And so there's going to be some real challenges in terms of productivity and how it's measured based upon the changing in the workforce and demands of workers in terms of how they want to work, and whether they're willing to work under circumstances that are much more comfortable for me as an employer, but might be less comfortable for them. So we have all these jobs available that are currently still available. We don't have enough workers for those jobs. And so we've seen the ability of the number of jobs available to absorb people who are laid off, to be able to see that happening. Over the last 4 weeks, we've seen some indication that the ability of the economy to absorb the newly unemployed has changed, and with some mixed results, but by and large, it appears that ability to absorb laid off employees, people who go on the unemployment rolls, that ability for the economy to absorb those employees has diminished a little bit. And so that's something we need to be taking a look at. I think it's reasonable to think that the July jobs report, which will come out next week, that the July jobs report will probably be relative on the household survey, which is when unemployment rate is done, will probably be pretty much stable, but there may be a little bit of an indication that increased number of people who are unemployed in that jobs report, but you're not going to see a dramatic change in the unemployment rate or anything like that. I don't anticipate seeing a change in the unemployment rate until the one that comes out in September, which would be the August report. And by the time we get the one in October, I think we'll begin to see real movement. And that's, by the way, I hope I'm wrong. Unemployment is, first of all, anybody who's been unemployed knows it's terrible. People like me, who's job, kind of our whole mentality is wrapped up in our job a little bit. Being unemployed but really puts you at loose ends, and so it's just not. It's the questioning about what you're going to do and how you're going to handle it is something that we all end up going through at some point. At least many of us go through at some point. But it's a terrible thing, and you don't wish it on anybody. And certainly, as strange as it might seem, being political, I cannot root for a bad outcome for the U.S. economy under any circumstance. No matter how goofed up our government is, and Joe Biden's administration is, having people in despair and helplessness and increasing your homeless population and all the different evils that come out of people being unable to get a job and hold a job is, from a human perspective, you can't root for that. It's a terrible thing. So I hope I'm wrong, but I believe I believe we're going to start seeing unemployment creep up. And by the time we hit election day in November, people will be talking about unemployment. The Democrats will be coming up with all sorts of stimulus plans to stimulate the economy and spend more money. And say, well, inflation is not as important as unemployment for giving people money. And so I think we'll have a battle in November or in October about the spend, basically the tax and spend priorities of the Democrats and the way Republicans tend to want to let markets work and kind of work their way through. And not to artificially create environments where you prolong what could be a very short-term pain, and you prolong it and turn it into a massive, massive problem. So that's the fight you're going to have. And I think in October, we see a little bit of that with an announcement that there may be a deal on what Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia was willing to do in terms of some small, dramatically cut back version of Biden's Build Back Better plan, and which will include some tax increases and some additional spending. The main takeaway on that is, unfortunately, what they're going to do is they're going to adopt a price control model on pharmaceuticals, on drugs, a price control model that will disrupt the ability for drugs like Alzheimer's drugs and the like to be developed and created in this country and elsewhere in the world, since we're the only ones who do the creation. And so it's going to have long-term consequences, but the Democrats really want to be able to say that they did something about drug prices. And in saying that they did something about drug prices, they really don't care that the way to deal with drug prices is force countries around the world to pay their share on drug prices and eliminate their caps, eliminate their freezes, and eliminate their ability to kick the cost of research, which the entire world benefits from, but kick it off on U.S. consumers, which is what has happened over the course of the past 20 years. And so so rather than take that on, I think the Democrats are just going to they're trying to take the easy way. So we're going to do price caps too. And, the fact of the matter is, you fall in love with your generics, because newly created drugs, unless they are blockbusters, are going to become much more rare. Because quite honestly, if it's $1.5 billion to develop a medicine, which it is, it takes you years to get it to market after you've got the patent filed, and you have a very, very narrow number of years that you can actually make your money back on it. It's hard to do that with price caps unless you are able to sell a whole lot of those medicines. So the next Viagra will do really well still, but the next drug that's designed to deal with a relatively rare disease won't happen. And oh, by the way, since the Congress has the power over Medicare and old age spending, it'll be drugs that affect seniors. You don't expect a better arthritis medicine and that kind of thing. And that's where the real pain occurs, is that new drugs that deal with diseases of the elderly will become they'll be much less profitable to make, and hence as much less profitable to make, there'll be fewer of them made, and less money will be invested in the research to meet those needs. And that's the fallout. But short term, they'll get a headline that they're cutting drug costs. In terms of how do we get out of this mess, the economic mess, enough of the stupid solution that they've come up with, and that the Democrats are now going to say they're doing something. How we really get out of this mess is, always a little more complicated than, how we got into it. But ultimately, if this president wants to get out of this mess, start developing domestic energy again, encourage the development of domestic energy. That's the single most important thing you can do. Expand coal and natural gas production in terms of energy, electricity production. Allow the opening of coal-fired plants that were closed. Allow them to be reopened, and with guarantees that they'll be open for 10 to 20 years. So it's worth investing in them. And put a moratorium on various regulations that encourage the shutdown of refineries. We need to reopen. We've had a number of refineries closed because of ethanol standards, and they're making something other than ethanol, so they essentially had to buy credits that are they're kind of a fake government created environmental credit. It's called a RINs credit, but it's an environmental credit. So they are subsidizing small refineries and making propane and other things are subsidized, and heating oil are subsidizing refiners who are making ethanol, because ethanol's more expensive to make, and they wanted to encourage refiners to make ethanol. And so we subsidize refiners who make ethanol. And so rather than burning food, if we went off and we said, hey, we're going to go off and we're going to try to open a few new refineries, and just as we could say, I don't know, make it so those refineries are making diesel fuel, and so we're adding to our diesel fuel supply. The minute you add your diesel fuel supply, your prices of diesel go down. Your cost of driving a truck go down. The price of delivering stuff to market go down. The price of having a tractor in the field goes down. The price of hauling the guy who's got a truck who goes to construction sites, his everyday costs go down. It's a virtuous cycle that happens when your diesel costs go down. And while it wouldn't affect the non-diesel prices at the pump, it would directly affect the prices that you're going to pay downstream on fruits and vegetables, on anything that gets delivered to Walmart, because the cost of delivering it, the cost of transportation will go down. And those price pressures have an impact. Has an impact on what you pay for Amazon. When they deliver that package to Amazon from Amazon in 2 hours at your doorstep miraculously, that package came from somewhere. There was cost built into that product based upon the cost of transportation. So all those, you take the underlying cost structure by tackling the diesel fuel problem, you tackle one of the structural problems that create inflation. And if you did nothing else but that, you would be doing a tremendous service. The simple thing, as opposed to attacking pipelines to get energy from point A to point B, let's open the door for building new pipelines, for whether it's Keystone XL or pipelines are proposed, because it doesn't do a, I could, if I were a driller, if I were an oil driller and I had a lease on a property, I can punch the holes in the ground and I can bring the fuel up. I can bring oil and natural gas up out of the ground. That's their business. But if you can't send that, if you don't have anywhere you can send it, if you don't have the ability to hook into a pipeline to send that to market, you might as well not punch the holes in the ground. In fact, you're getting the environmental cost of the methane and other releases that you get with none of the benefits of being able to increase the supply stock for oil and natural gas. So that's just stupid. And yet the attack on the pipeline structure, the regulatory attack on the pipeline structure has been, we've watched it over 10 years with the Keystone XL, and there's a lot of pipeline that isn't being laid that none of us have heard of because of environmental attacks on those pipelines. So a simple thing, we need to get energy from point A to point B. And the single best way to do it is through pipelines. And let's get the pipelines laid so we can actually have an energy infrastructure that meets the need for 2150, as opposed to one that meets the need for 2000. And that's our 2050. So that's what we really need, is we need to be forward thinking in an energy delivery system. Because no matter how much dreaming they have about the world being run by windmills and solar panels, that's a dream. Okay. We may have the battery storage capacity in 10, 20 years to be able to have a significantly higher amount of our electricity infrastructure being run by windmills and solar panels. But without the capacity to store energy in a meaningful way, really store energy, depending upon windmills and solar is effectively depending upon the wind blowing and the sun shining. Because if you can't store the energy, you make yourself dependent. And we've seen that, the state of Texas has that problem. They've got an insulated energy system where all the public utilities are all self-contained in a government system that they created. And they made a rule that you can only control so much of the market. And so the unanticipated side effect of that is that investing in a natural gas or a new coal plant fired utility plant doesn't make any sense, because it puts you at the edge of or beyond the amount of energy one company is allowed to do. And so to increase their energy capacity, they've been going the last 10 years, 15 years maybe. They've been pretty much just growing their wind and solar sectors. And that works really good until it gets really cold or really hot. And when it gets really cold or really hot, it fails. And so the Texas with more energy resource than anywhere else in this country finds itself with blackouts and brownouts, because they've embraced the same stupid policies as California and have made themselves reliant upon, from different reasons, but reliant upon unreliable energy sources, wind and solar. That's the reality of the situation. I hate to bag on Texas, but they bring it on themselves. They need to reform their system. They need to go back to a market system and encourage the development of natural gas and coal-fired plants, as well as nuclear. And wind is a supplement. It isn't a primary provider. It's a supplement. Until we start realizing the reality of that, we're going to find ourselves more and more dependent upon the sun and the wind. And I don't know. I kind of like not living in a 14th century economy, but the left wants us there. So we have to fix the energy problem. If we don't fix the energy problem, the rest of it doesn't work. We have ports in California that once again are being impacted by a labor law that is that's causing a problem. It's causing it so independent truckers are not allowed to carry loads out in California. So if goods are being delivered in the Port of Oakland, Port of Los Angeles, Port of Long Beach, as 40% of our imports nationwide come through Long Beach and Los Angeles. If goods are coming through those ports, 70% of the trucks can't be used to actually take those goods and bring them to the rest of the country. Department of Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg needs to get off his tail, stop preening for cameras, and do something about it. And because this is an interstate commerce issue, and he can override, he can just tell California, we're overriding this issue for any trucks that are engaged in interstate commerce. And you don't get to block interstate commerce based on the fact you're the point of entry for apples or pears or anything else, or apples that you eat and apples that you look at as your phone. So that's what the federal government can do. The port system is part of the federal system, and it's part of the interstate commerce system. And these trucks are driving on interstate highways. And so the federal government can tell the state of California, well, you can do whatever you want to inside the state of California, but you cannot restrict the travel by trucks, interstate travel by trucks. Buttigieg has that power. He's completely ignoring his capacity to do that. And once again, it's because the Biden administration cares more about the optics of protecting unions and trying to create more Teamsters in the world than they do about the actual commerce that goes on in this country. And this is part of the fundamental transformation that we're seeing. And quite honestly, they are 100% culpable in this, because it's the AB5, which is the law that puts independent truckers out of business in California, is a leftist construct, and this administration has embraced it. So let's just be real. There are things that can be done. There are things that can be done now. We're still going to have supply chain problems from China. President Trump would be jawboning the businesses to move their supply chains out of China, and as he was doing during his administration, and those businesses would be having no choice but to do so, because China's become an unreliable producer, because they shut down factories, and if there's one case of COVID they find anywhere, they shut down all the factories, and so they're no longer a reliable supplier. Businesses in China are looking for outside suppliers to supply them with parts and other things. So they're looking outside China to import parts, because they can't depend on the Chinese supply chain. Well, if the businesses inside China can't depend on the Chinese supply chain, then we darn well better not. And so that's an easy kind of business ought to be working towards that objective. But, the federal government should be jawboning them to try to get them to do that. The fact of the matter is, and I keep saying this, and maybe it's a bad idea. I don't know. I think it's a good idea. I'll keep saying it. If we're getting a lot of our illegal alien population coming from the Central American Triangle countries, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and Mexico, we've got free trade agreements with Mexico, with the USMCA. We've got free trade agreement, CAFTA, with Central America. We've got a Caribbean basin free trade agreement for the islands in the Caribbean. If you want access to our markets, far better off, build it here. But if you're not going to build it in America, build it in Central America. Build it in Mexico. Build it in Panama. Build it in Colombia. We've got a Colombia free trade agreement. There's absolutely no excuse not to build it in the Central and Northern South American countries that have where there's a road system that goes north and can come here, or they can ship it here. If they're Colombia or on the Caribbean side, they ship it through the port of Texas, and we avoid California altogether. And and that way we create jobs and prosperity in places where people currently have despair. And if the system creates jobs and prosperity in those areas, people aren't going to be leaving there in droves to come here. And while having an organized, smart immigration system is essential to this country, having unfettered, open borders, as Joe Biden is doing, is an absolute total economic and personal disaster for so many. So, folks, there's things that can be done. And it all works together if we think about it in an integrated way. And so those businesses are sitting there saying, hey, I can't depend on my supply chains in China anymore. Build it in Honduras. They got a brand new international airport, the state-of-the-art international airport. Build it in Honduras. Build it in Guatemala. They've got a Western-friendly government there. Duarte would love to have businesses building factories in Guatemala. And you save the shipping costs from China, you save the political uncertainty that exists in China, and you create an environment for yourself where you can make your same profit by using lower wage laborers and having lower transportation costs, and help America in terms of a more prosperous Central America makes for a more prosperous America. So it's kind of a win-win, kind of makes sense. So I'm continuing to job own myself, businesses I know to do that. And, it's part of the solution. So folks, that's, there are things that can be done. There's things that make sense. There's, with China on the rise, continuing to be on the rise, there's things we need to be doing. We need to lessen our dependency on Chinese steel. One of the ways in aluminum, easy way to do that. Joe Biden imposed, after President Trump lifted it, a aluminum tariff on UAE, United Arab Emirates, which has a lot of aluminum and exports it. We said we had a tariff on that as part of the Abraham Accords. President Trump lifted that tariff. Joe Biden, my first week on the job, reinstated that tariff. So I tough on trade. Well, he was really trying to kill the Abraham Accords, but lift that tariff. Let's import aluminum from UAE. If we need to import aluminum, rather than having countries serve as nothing more than shills for China, and import their aluminum and steel from China and then re-export it to us as if they actually milled it, which they didn't. So at the very least, let's support some allies in terms of if we're going to be importing aluminum or steel. Let's at least support some allies and try to have, while also building and reinforcing our aluminum and steel industries, which are essential for this country. So there's a lot of problems. But the bottom line is we are in a recession. Joe Biden can't talk his way out of that. He can't redefine it. We are in a recession, and it is and the hope is that it'll be a short-term recession, that we won't see massive job losses. My fear is, and what I think, you held a gun to my head, what I think is going to happen is we will see significant job losses, and we'll be back to 6.5% unemployment rate within 6 to 9 months, and the interest rates will be somewhere around, the Fed interest rates will be in 5, 6, 7%, and we'll be having, and I think inflation will subside. But it won't subside because of any government policies. It's going to subside because the demand for energy and demand for other services is going to go down, because recessions mean things are contracting. So there's less demand. And when there's less demand, prices go down. And so essentially inflation will come under control, but it'll because of the Biden created recession. And so he can claim to drive prices down, but if you do it by killing the economy, kind of is bad taste in medicine. And so hopefully we'll use this as an opportunity to do the things to rebuild our infrastructure so we can, in fact, go back and become energy independent once again. And in doing so, become much less dependent upon foreign countries who don't like us very much to ship us goods, ship us oil, ship us that we desperately need. We have to become energy independent again, and Joe Biden's policies that oppose that are the reason we've gone into recession, and they're the reason why we had the inflation which sent us in this direction. With that, I'm going to look at some questions here. I've got Diana, I'm going to put yours up first. I feel as if I live inside a circus. Hey, imagine if you were me. It's a circus, man. We got the clown, and the clowns are running the show. Remember, these are the adults. These are the guys who are the self-proclaimed adults, and and they. But we live in a world where flying the American flag in front of your house makes you a target of the U.S. government, and burning the American flag makes you their political ally. So yeah, the world's upside down in a whole lot of ways, and I still have a fundamental belief that Americans believe in America, believe in the concept of America, believe in markets, believe in capitalism, believe in individual liberty, not dictated by the federal government. And as a result, I think we're seeing we're going to see a transformational shift in this election, and hopefully again in 2024 that puts the AOC philosophical world on its heels for a generation. I'm hoping that occurs. I think we see signs that it can occur. The biggest challenge is our Republican leadership is so tepid and never defends actual freedom. They'll attack Biden, but they won't defend freedom. They won't push freedom policies, and anything other than the keywords cut taxes. They always say cut taxes, but they won't. They really don't get down into the dirt and talk about why that matters. They don't talk about. They want to talk economic theories. All that's garbage. Fact is, it's your money, and so so they don't fight on a philosophical level, and the left does. And when the left fights on a philosophical level and on a heart level, that's how they transform young people into being tricked into their policies again. And so it's my hope that we can get some people on the right who have giant megaphones to start talking about why freedom matters, and reminding people of why America is the greatest country on earth. And then maybe perhaps the circus, the 3-ring circus may be down to only a 2-ring or 1-ring circus. Although I have to tell you, during the Trump administration, there were times when I felt like it was a circus for a totally different reason, because there were so many different fights going on so many different things that you're sitting there. It was even for somebody who does this all the time, it's hard to keep up with. I've got Khadija Ibrahim. Open the pipelines back up here in Florida. We have 15 ports that we can utilize. DeSantis says Florida ports can help alleviate supply chain problems. Our governor of Florida wants USA to use our ports. We need to clean out all of our corrupt lifetime politicians. Yep, I agree with that. Let me give you there's a little practical aspect to that. A lot of the cargo ships are too big for the Panama Canal. Okay, let's just be real. We don't own the Panama Canal anymore. In fact, the Chinese practically control the Panama Canal now. So we have this problem that getting stuff from the Pacific to the Atlantic side is really, really hard. You can't go around the passageway under South America is a very rough passageway even today. It's not really suitable for a lot of traffic. And so what you have to do is if you're coming from hypothetically China, and you have to go all the way around India, you have to go through under the Horn of Africa, and come back up and go then all the way from the South Atlantic to the Mid-Atlantic to North Atlantic to hit Texas, Florida, and the like, and Savannah, Charleston, lots of ports on the East Coast and in the Caribbean. And so that's a long, long way to go. And it's a lot more costly because the cost of fuel is pretty high for cargo ships. And from an environmental perspective, even though they've changed the fuel that cargo ships run on to be much more much less polluting, which was a good thing. That also drives up the cost of those cargo ships. So once again, the longer the cargo ship has to go to deliver the cargo, the more expensive the cargo, and so you get back into that circular problem of the cost of transportation makes it so the cost of goods go up, and that's fit in. I agree that uh, Florida has great ports. There's a Panama Canal that's much bigger through, and there's been a lot of talk about that over a long period of time. It's never happened. It hasn't happened because the governments are unstable. It hasn't happened because it's a lot of money. It hasn't happened because, quite honestly, we didn't have, it wasn't a Teddy Roosevelt with a vision to do that, and which is how the Panama Canal got built in the first place. So but that is, if we move our supply chain, if domestically, if businesses move supply chain though, and they move it to Central America or into the Caribbean states, then or to Europe for that matter, or to African states for that matter, if they do that, then what do we have? Then you're dealing with the Atlantic Ocean, not the Pacific, which is a much bigger ocean, and and the Florida ports become much more important in terms of solving this problem. So a lot of this deals with supply chain, and one of the advantages Florida has by having all those ports available, it does encourage companies to invest in importing and potentially in putting those factories into South America and Central America, and at which point it's a short haul from there to the Florida ports. Let's see. Let me see what we got here. I'm just going to do this because I okay. Now, Sam Abba, I've got to say, I think it's pencil neck. I don't think it's pencil head, although because I think you're talking about Adam Schiff there, and I don't know. But all I know is if it's pencil, if Adam Schiff's pencil head, I think we just need to start using the eraser and make him go away. So there's a lot of other things here. Well, Diana comes back, and how long do people wait? Well, here's what you need to be doing right now. You darn well better be getting all your, anybody who's bitching right now, get them to register to vote if they're not registered to vote. If they are registered to vote, get them involved with things like Americans for Limited Government so they can be informed about what to do, and hopefully get involved in local campaigns to be able to make sure that every single person who thinks like we do comes out to vote, and they all vote, and they're voting in concert with a bunch of fingers, one fist, to throw the bums out. I mean, that's what we have to do right now. We've got an election 2022. We have to have an overwhelming victory in 2022 to put the kibosh on the Biden agenda from 2023 and 2024. If we get an overwhelming victory in 2022, then Congress can do stuff like put into the budget bills, into the funding bills, specific restrictions that Biden will have to either sign. He'll either have to sign or negotiate some middle ground. We'll be able to say, you're building the wall. We're going to go back to the return to Mexico policy. Let Biden veto a funding bill for the Department of Homeland Security because he doesn't want to build a wall, because he doesn't want to finish the wall. He doesn't want to return to Mexico policy. Let him do that. Okay. So if we control both the House and the Senate, then you have the capacity to do those kinds of things, which in 23 and 24, which to some level put restraints on the Biden administration's ability to just wantonly destroy our country. So that's what we need to be doing right now. And this is something, you don't have to be an expert in politics to do this. These are simple things. Right now, I'm investing heavily in trying to create a Facebook group that allows us to reach more people on Facebook. And it's a process. But the first part of the process is to reach people on Facebook who think like we do. We've increased our Facebook likes by about 25% over the last month and a half through an aggressive effort that we've engaged in. We've got a group that's formed. It's gone from under 100 to over 1,000 people in that group right now. And by getting people into that group, and we're inviting as many people as we can to join that group who like our page. Simply, if you're on Facebook, like the Americans for Limited Government page. Simple thing to do. Invite when you receive our email. If you're not already subscribed to our email list, subscribe to our email list. Go to getliberty.org and subscribe, so we have your email address. Ultimately, our plan, okay, because we know there's social media censorship. Our plan is to get as many people as we can get who are on the broader social media into our universe, and then get them into our actual email universe, because we are working very hard. Once somebody's in our email universe, then I'm able to send you, we need to take on Nancy Pelosi. We need to do stuff on energy. Right, the last one we've worked on, we need to tell Joe Biden and tell Congress to stop selling the strategic oil reserves. Those are campaigns that we can do. And the more people who are in the email universe that we have, the more people we're able to engage. On one campaign against vaccine mandates, we were able to put 23 million emails into Congress. 23 million emails. But that was expanding well beyond our email list in doing that. I'm putting money that is kind of risk capital into advertising campaigns on Facebook, because I know if we can get people engaged and I can get them involved in this universe, the more people we get involved, the more we get a virtuous cycle going. So anybody who's watching this, the best thing you can do is invite people, subscribe to this email, to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the Facebook page, and invite other people to do it, because we've got 1 million people, 2 million people who should be and could be and would want to be part of Americans for Limited Government's universe. The problem is I only have 105,000 of those people inside my email list. I've got 156,000 of those people on my Facebook page. I only have about 5,000 of those people, about 4,000 or 5,000 of those people on my YouTube page. So the problem is those people are in your contact list. The people who follow you, they're in your world. And so the best way to get it is you have to become part of your battle for freedom in this country. And I just implore you to do this. Encourage people to follow Americans for Limited Government. And, they can take action or they cannot take action. We do ask for money occasionally on email, but the fact of the matter is we send you we send out our daily torch every single day, our various publications we send out. We send them out every single day, whether you give 5 days a week, whether or not you give money or not, because informing people is a big part of what we do. Educating people is a big part of what we do. And because the more people are educated, the more likely they're going to be in the fight for freedom. So do that, because right now we have to come together. We have to beat these people. And I hope that you'll do that. And by the way, we're not going to, I don't believe in going around doing a bunch of rallies and stuff, because so often it's just everybody talking to the same people. And it takes people, they spend so much time worrying about the rally. They don't get anybody outside, they don't get enough people involved, and they're not doing the things that win elections. So I'd rather focus on things that are smart, informative, and on point on issues that matter, like draining the swamp and those kind of issues that if we don't win long term, we lose. So those are the kinds of things that I prefer to spend time, energy, and effort on. And so no, we're not going to do a rally in your hometown. We're not going to. I was an NRA lobbyist for 9 years. I've done my share of rallies. There's a time and a place. And the fact of the matter is, there's lots of groups that do that. And we don't have to fill that niche. There's nobody who's fighting to drain the swamp. We are. So I try to put our resources on those things that matter, are existential threats to the country, that we can uniquely do something about, and then get people who care about it to put their focus on it and drive an issue that makes it unique, and get that issue to get in the public sphere so broadly that everybody else chases in, at which point there's a lot of firepower then. And we win the issue. But somebody's got to attack the gate first. Somebody's got to attack the wall first. We do that, and we proudly do that. It's what our role is. And the only way we can successfully do that is when we have people who are joining us in that attack. And if we were able to increase our list by 10 times, up to 1 million people from 105,000, if we increased our subscribers 10 times, America would have a significantly more limited government a year after that than they would otherwise, because we win battles, people engage, and we win battles that nobody else fights. Because quite honestly, I don't care what everybody else is talking about. I care about what matters. I care about saving things like local zoning, which Americans for Limited Government saved. Okay. I care about draining the swamp, changing the system so we can no longer have a weaponized civil service that is working against Americans' freedom and working for expanded government. We have to win that battle. So we pick those battles that really are core battles that we have to win. And, occasionally we'll do shiny object stuff because it needs to be done. But our bottom line is that's where our heart is in winning the battles that fundamentally chop down the tree of communism and replace it and allow places to grow where freedom can thrive. That's what we do. That's what I need you to help us do. So if you don't do anything else, get your friends to join in on Americans for Limited Government. And in doing that, I promise you, we will not waste a dollar that you send us, and we will not waste a minute of your time in the fight for freedom. With that, I think I just ended the podcast with a speech, so I apologize for that. But anyway, folks, we will see you next time. I'll probably be on tomorrow, so pay attention. I think we're going to talk a little bit tomorrow on. I want to talk about some of the things that's happening in terms of food shortage and the like. So we'll go from there. And thank you very much for tuning in. This is Rick Manning, Americans for Limited Government. Go to dailytorch.com to see our content if you haven't seen it. And just invite friends. Thank you very much. And with that, we'll sign off.